Welcome back to 52 at 52. My name's Matt McDowell, and today's job is construction worker. But before I get into that, job number 8, construction worker, I want to kind of talk about sometimes I have a tendency to forget words, to stumble over words. I apologize. I mean, you guys don't get to see the stuff that I cut out because it is ugly over on this side of the camera. But I do my best. But I stumbled across one yesterday, and I kind of like this one. And the phrase is off tangent. I was kind of off tangent, which means you're what? Back on point? Let's get off tangent here for a moment. I like that one. You can get t-shirts made up with that. Get my staff working on t-shirts. You might think that I have early onset Alzheimer's with the way that I forget words like grill and pump and hose and nozzle. It's not. It's just I'm nervous. I'm nervous. People who stutter, minds go fast. I can't even stutter. Sometimes I just sit here just spinning. That's how fast my mind's working. It's working really fast. Welcome to job number 8. Construction worker. It's good to have you back. You knew this was coming up. Everyone's worked construction. Everyone's built something. Maybe not everyone, but I have. And I have 3 main scenarios that I want to share with you. The first one was I worked for my dad. We built this cabin up in the Sierra Buttes in a place called Merry Mountain Village. And we built this cabin, and it took something like 9 years or something. It took a long time because we would just work on it on weekends in the summer. And it was nice. It wasn't like some sort of lean-to tin shack. This thing was a nice, it had a sunken conversation pit, which I have yet to see in another house. My mom was really big on the sunken conversation pit. If you've never seen a sunken conversation pit, basically it's just the floor and then it kind of goes down and there's couches and you can sit in there by the fire and have a conversation. The cabin was nicer than our house. It was really nice. My dad, being a school teacher, he was new to construction. He'd built a house before, maybe 1 or 2 houses, but copper pipe was kind of new for him, and he'd never sweated copper pipe before. And if you've ever sweated copper pipe, you have to put the solder in there. Well, first you put the flux in there, and then you put the solder in, and the flux allows the solder to suck back into the joint, so your elbow joints, and then when you put things together, the solder gets in there, and you get a nice tight joint that doesn't leak. Well, my dad did the whole house without any flux. Therefore, almost every single joint leaked. And so then we had to crawl underneath this house, which was big, and he'd have to undo the joint, put the flux in, and then redo it. And I would be underneath there with him, handing him like, here's the sparker, here's the map gas, here's this. I would just hand him stuff. Here, that's the way my dad liked to do construction. You'd stand there, and you would just hand him stuff. You were like a nurse, and he was like a surgeon. Then, when I was about 10 years old, we were up on the second story, and we were roofing the house. The tar paper was already down, and we were putting in asphalt shingles. And I was banging in those nails, 10 years old, up in the top of the thing. It was a gorgeous day in August, 1974. I'm 10 years old. It was fantastic. There's the dogwood trees, and there's pine trees, and you're up there in the trees, and it smelled great. And then my dad, in the middle of it, we had this radio. In the middle of doing this, he stops us and says, okay, we have to listen to this because this is historic what's going to happen right now. And I'm like, what is it? He goes, the President of the United States is going to resign his presidency. It's never happened before, and it's never happened since. And so we sat there up on top of that roof, just sitting there, enjoying the day, listening to President Nixon resign his presidency. Kind of a strong memory for me. I also worked with him in a duplex. We're in there working, and again, my job is to hand him stuff. So he's in there. We walk into the duplex. It's empty. They're painting it. There's just bare floors, and we're doing something in the bathroom, fixing the toilet or something like that. And he's like, "Go out to the truck and get me a wrench." And so I go out to the truck to get him a wrench, and then I go out, and I was kind of confused. I'm like, "Well, why did I walk all the way around this house? Why don't I just walk in?" Because guess what? I didn't know what a duplex was. No one ever explained to me what a duplex was. It was just like a duplex. I thought we just called them, I didn't know anything. I just thought it was a regular house. And so I'm just going to go into this door right here because it's closer. So I open the door and I walk in. I'm like, wow, I don't remember the house looking like this. I must be in a different part of the house because I didn't see all of it. Because this has furniture and curtains And I walk back and like the kitchen has got food in it, and I walk all the way back into the bedroom, going into the bathroom, and the bedroom door is open, and there's a person in there sleeping. And I'm thinking, this is very confusing. I've made an error. And so I turn back around and I come back out and I go in the other door that I actually originally came out of, and I go, hey Dad, what's a duplex exactly? And he explains that it's two houses kind of stuck together. He goes, why? And I said, well, because I kind of walked in the other one because I thought it was just all one. And he thought that was pretty funny. How would you know? Later on, my sister Lucy and her husband Vic, they bought the duplexes. And they were going to fix them up, doing some remodeling. You know, Vic, he was a bit of a wild man. I'm not even going to say bit of a wild man. The guy was wild. He's crazy. We would do, and when you're 10 or, 11 or 12, he would just do crazy stuff. You're like thinking, you're 10 and you're like, I'm not sure if this is appropriate behavior. I can remember walking down a mall once, and we had to buy a hose for the house, for his house. We're buying a hose through the mall. What could be more, it's mundane. This is a mundane task, buying a hose from a hardware store. Next thing I know, he is throwing the hose up in the air as he walks through this crowded mall, and he's throwing it up higher and higher. Pretty soon, he's launching that thing 15, 20, 25 feet, as hard as he can. He's throwing that hose up in the air and then like chasing after it. People are having to scatter out of the way, and he's yelling. And he carried that kind of attitude over into his remodeling. It was more of a way to relieve stress, I think, because he had a pretty stressful, Silicon Valley Bay Area job. It wasn't the Silicon Valley of that yet. It was just the Bay Area. He worked for GE. There was 4 things that I remember. One was we had to take the medicine cabinet. There was a built-in medicine cabinet in the bathroom, and we had to take it out. And in this medicine cabinet, there was a little slot that was designed for you to take your razor blades and just slip them in that slot. And then they would just fall down into the wall forever. Razor blades fill up the wall. Why not? Better than a landfill, I guess. As we pull this out, I want you to picture you pull this thing away, and decades worth of rusty razor blades come cascading down onto the floor, and rusty. It was like a nightmare horror show, all those rusty razor blades. Because he used them more like a stress relief kind of fun house, we would do things like we have to take out there was a fence that was rotting, and it had lots of ivy on it. Instead of taking the ivy and getting the ivy off and then going in there and, with a crowbar and some hammer and taking out the rotting fence, he looks at that fence and he just goes, stand back, and he gets into his Volvo and just ran into the fence like 5 or 6 times. Guess what? It worked. And guess what? It was a lot of fun to watch that. Another dicey thing he had us do is he had me go up into a tree, and it was a little bit drizzly that day. So I'm up in this tree with tennis shoes, and so I'm kind of slipping around in this tree, and then he hands me a chainsaw because I was just going to cut a few limbs off. And so I'm cutting these. I got this chainsaw and these slippery tennis shoes, and I'm not even roped in. I'm just kind of, one-handing it. Told my mom about that when I got home, and she was not too happy with Vic, which was easy to do. It was easy not to be happy with Vic. Doing dangerous stuff, I think one of the reasons we do dangerous stuff, so we can report it back to our moms and have them go, there was a built-in china cabinet, and they were going to knock it out to put in a breezeway. I don't know why they were knocking it out. We had to get rid of it for some reason. And instead of us just taking the hinges off and taking this built-in china cabinet, and it was a door, the door had panes of glass in it. It was quite pretty, if I remember right. Instead of us just taking it off and, being on our way, Vic hands me the sledgehammer and says, walk down to the end of the hall, and I want you to throw that sledgehammer as hard as you can at this china cabinet. I'm like, seriously? Yes. And so I go down there and just chuck that sledgehammer down, and it smashes. Then he takes a turn, and then Bob takes a turn, and we just sat there for like 20 minutes just throwing this sledgehammer at this china cabinet. It was shattered into like a million pieces, tiny little bits of glass. It was so fun. I think we spent the rest of the afternoon just cleaning up. But man, was that fun. He knew how to do renovations. He wasn't none of this. That would be a great TV show. Anger management renovations. Because they're always so business-like. Yes, and then we do this. And the last guy I worked for, or the last story I'm going to tell you about, is that I worked for a guy named Merwin Mitchell. And what a great name, Merwin. Merwin Mitchell drove around in an Econoline van. And so whenever I hear that song, Tonight's the Night by Neil Young, Bruce Berry was a working man. He used to drive that Econoline van. I don't think Bruce Berry, I think Merwin Mitchell. And he was a handyman of sorts, and he would fix things all the time. And I think he had a waxed mustache. Bit of a character. He hired me because I was small, and I could crawl underneath a house. And he gave me like 7 or 8 car jacks, and I would go in underneath the house, and I would jack up the foundation at these specific points so that he could get in there and he could shore up this foundation because the foundation was kind of messed up. It's kind of dangerous. It wasn't fun. I'm going to say I almost said it was fun, but it wasn't really that fun because crawling underneath old houses is never fun. I had to do it once, and it involved a dead possum, and that's still a horrific memory for me. You're in there and you're jacking these up, and it's not too much because you don't want the floor joists to come down, and the whole thing could collapse on you. The whole time I was down there, I was thinking, if the foundation's bad, what am I doing down here? Underneath a house with a bad foundation? I can't be good. And in a small town, one of the things you take for granted is people's names, like Merwin Mitchell. I have yet to meet anyone else in my life named Merwin. Correct. No Merwins in my life. Our veterinarian who lived next door, his name was DeVere. A little bit more common because my grandfather's name, he was also DeVere. And DeVere would never go by DeVere. He would always go by Doc. I never heard anyone call him anything but Doc. And he also, awesome veterinarian, but he always had a cigarette or a cigar in his mouth. I have no memory of him other than having a cigarette or a cigar in his mouth. Doc and Betty. Great neighbors. His first name was DeVere. And the only reason I knew that is because it was on the sign out in front of his house saying DeVere, Milbrat, veterinarian. But you just take it for granted, like, oh yeah, DeVere. And then it's only till later, like, man, no one's named Merwin. No one's named DeVere. I went to school with Jerd. To this day, I've never met another Jerd. I don't even know what kind of name that is. It's not short for anything. Not short for Jerdowski or anything like that. It's just Jerd. And his dad, Brud. And those names, I like those names so much, I use them in almost every screenplay I can. Brud and Jerd, those are great names. And you just kind of take them for granted until years later. You're like, wait a minute, Jerd, that's kind of an odd name. There were these other 2 guys in my hometown, big guys, 6'2" or 3" or something like that, 275 pounds, big men in their 50s or 60s. And their names were Pinky and Fussy. Why? Because when Pinky was a baby, he came out and he was kind of pink. So they called him Pinky. And Fussy, his brother, he was kind of a fussy baby. So they called him Fussy. I have no idea what these guys' real names were. It was Pinky Stewart and Fussy Stewart. Have no idea what their real names were. I don't even think they knew. And the one that kind of takes the cake for me was the guy, he was a year older than me in school, and his name was Vornan Dornan. Now your last name's Dornan, and you're thinking, our last name's Dornan. What goes with Dornan? I know. Vornan. It sounds good. Vornan Dornan. My name is not so great. Matt McDowell. It sounds like my brothers used to tease me that because we had sheep behind our house, and they go, Matt, and they go, Matt, the sheep are calling you. It's hard to say. It doesn't roll off the tongue like Merwin Mitchell or Vornan Dornan. My sisters call me Matthew, and Mr. Olson in 7th grade called me Matthew. Oh, I don't know why I don't like Matthew. But Matt McDowell, that doesn't sound that great. He sounds like you're barking out something. And Vornan Dornan, he was a great saxophone player. Really good. I mean, he would just get a beautiful tone out of that thing. But he was 100% band nerd. And he had this button, and it was a picture of a saxophone and a picture of a drum cymbal. And I'm like, what's up with your button? He goes, oh, don't you get it? Sax cymbal. Wow. Never heard that name again, and I've never seen that button either. Construction worker. Couple little stories there for you. I'm sure, construction stories, those can go on. Nightmare stories when people are like, oh, I hired this contractor and, my neighbors are in lawsuits. You would think that we would have construction down. We've been building houses and stuff for a long time. You'd think there'd be like one house that's like, this is the perfect way to do this. But no, homes on homes, people are always messing stuff up. It's difficult. We don't quite have that construction work down. It's evolving. Construction, job number 8, 52 at 52. Tell your friends, subscribe. It's good having you here. One thing that's great about construction work is lunch. when we're building this house that I'm sitting in right now, One of the guys who was working there, we finished lunch, and he finishes eating, and he goes, well, that was horrible. Referring to his lunch. I mean, I ate it because I was hungry, but that was the worst meal I think I've ever had. And then let's get back to work. Vic. Still a wild man, probably. Man, he would do crazy stuff.